Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Anna Wells and Jeff Ranke. We each have more than 15 years covering the manufacturing industry. We work for manufacturing.net and industrial equipment news, and every week on the podcast, we take the 5 most popular stories on the website and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could help us out a lot by liking the video on YouTube or leaving us a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Anna, how are you doing this week?
I have to say, number 36 was the one where you got that thing totally right. Mm-hmm. Start to finish, that was your best intro. I'm excited. This is going to be a good podcast. Starting
with a compliment from Anna, I'm scared as to where it's going from here. We are also live, so make sure to ask questions if you have any when they come up. Jeff, we also received a shipment of Today in Manufacturing t-shirts. So I was thinking maybe we'd give some away.
That'd be awesome. Sounds good.
So I want to suggest that we give to the first 20 people that email us this week, we give out free t-shirts.
Why are we not wearing the t-shirts?
Because we're not those people.
Oh, okay.
I wear them at home. It's like
they're pretty sweet.
Yeah,
I like them.
Yeah.
No one gave me a t-shirt.
Okay, we're gonna give away 21 t-shirts this week. One's going to Anna.
I'll email you later.
She started with a compliment, and now she's just mad.
Back to Anna.
Yeah. Back to regular Anna.
Jeff, how you doing this week?
Awesome.
All right, very good. Let's jump into our first story this week. Our first story, NAM says China remains a hub of bad behaviors. On Monday, U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai took a shot at China's trade practices. She said, quote, "Our objective is not to inflame trade tensions with China, but above all else, we must defend to the hilt our economic interests." In response, the National Association of Manufacturers President and CEO Jay Timmons released a statement. In it, he said, quote, "China is not following through on important commitments made in the 2020 U.S.-China Phase 1 agreement, and it also remains a hub of bad behaviors, from intellectual property theft to market-distorting industrial subsidies that harm manufacturers and their employees here in the United States." He says manufacturers need a holistic and pragmatic approach to our relationship with China. And he was pleased that the Biden administration's approach reflects key priorities for manufacturers in the U.S. Jeff, what were your thoughts on Jay Timmons' statement?
I think the more aggressive we can be in addressing this trade imbalance, the better. So it's great to see NAM come out and make these types of statements. In looking at it, I did not realize the scope. I mean, it's like a 4x difference in terms of what we import to China as opposed to what we buy from them. So, I mean, we're looking at 105 versus $450 billion. Huge difference. Now, we have trade imbalances with a number of other countries as well. China is obviously the largest, but when we look at like the EU, it's still $150 billion deficit there as well. Really doesn't get any type of coverage. Notoriety is not as big. Obviously, it's half as much, but I think the other things that they're talking about here, these behaviors that we do encounter trying to compete within the Chinese market, are what makes this such a big and ongoing news story, and makes it really a big political topic as well. I know we've talked to plenty of people in a lot of different markets. The IP violations and having to worry about your intellectual property and your designs not being compromised, copied, basically stolen is enormous. And I don't know the work around there, because you are dealing also with a lot of companies doing that IP theft or some of those bad behaviors. Excuse me. They're state-owned companies. When you look at the top 10 exporters out of China, 6 of them are basically government-owned. So there's a lot of currency manipulation that we've talked about in China as well. A lot of things that normal companies would have to deal with in terms of costs. These companies do not. The government looks the other way because it's their company, and it gives them an unfair advantage, obviously. So addressing all of those things, the more pressure we can continue to put on China with these types of agreements, the better. I think one thing that was also kind of interesting in looking at the statement from the U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador is she brought about, or there was at least a reference made to the fact that the Biden administration is going to hold China more accountable than previous. I think they have to be careful there. Okay, the one thing that, and I was trying to figure a way to tiptoe around this, but I disagreed with President Trump on a lot of things. I did agree with a lot of stuff he put in place in going after this imbalance and talking about trade with China. And really in 2019, because let's throw out 2020, it was a weird year. I mean, it was the lowest level of this deficit since 2014. And when you looked at the Obama administration, in every year but one, that deficit increased. Well, Joe Biden was the vice president during that time. So this is something he should have a great familiarity with. His track record is not great, so I do hope the administration continues to pursue a lot of those strategies that Trump did put in place going forward.
Anna, one of the things that I've heard about ever since we started in this industry is about that IP theft. And I feel like it's almost become not a running joke, but you hear it so many times about how when somebody comes out with a new design, like, oh, it's just a matter of time before it's stolen and reproduced in China anyways. I feel like it's almost, I don't want to say become a punchline, but it's become sort of like a cost of doing business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of distrust, I think, when American companies talk about dealing with China. We're seeing more of that, I think. I'm impressed with Jay Timmons lately. I think he's taken some pretty firm stances on behalf of NAM, and he's been very public. You see him on a lot of mainstream news channels talking about manufacturing issues, and he's not afraid to speak to both sides of the aisle, which I think is important. Another organization that I think has really been kind of raising in prominence and getting their name out there is the Reshoring Initiative. And I think that some of this distrust with China and reshoring is kind of going hand in hand. We recently ran a story about the record level of reshoring that's actually taking place right now. It appears that American companies are kind of putting their money where their mouths are, because in 2020, I think there was a lot of lip service around, we're going to bring some of these supply chains back because of that stuff like IP theft that you mentioned, because of the slowdowns, because of the shortages, things like that. The Reshoring Initiative believes that the rate of jobs that are coming back from China specifically, which placed number 7 on their list of reshoring, with Korea being number 1. They think that the number of jobs coming back from China is actually being underreported. And back to your point about the state-owned businesses, obviously there's a lot of sort of opaque language that comes along with this. You don't know how forthright like they're being with that number, China. It's highly possible it's much higher. America's distrust with China, I think, has been intensifying over the years. With NAM now saying that they're not following through on their commitments and they need to be held accountable, I think that it's just another example of the kind of behavior that's been driving this reshoring for years. Companies are becoming fed up with these delays, the quality issues, the tariffs, the human rights abuses, the IP theft, and the pandemic has kind of compounded some of these threats. So more manufacturers, I think, seem to be reaching their tipping point. I don't know. I think it's an amalgamation of all these issues just kind of at once, and we're reaching a point of maybe no return. A lot of people they want to get their supply chains out of there. So I think we'll see more of this. Yeah. I think initially people thought we'll see if companies actually follow through with trying to shorten those supply chains and make some changes, because people talked about it forever. Oh yeah. Especially the IP theft, as you mentioned. People talked about that forever. Like, oh, we can't keep doing this. It's just a matter of time before this design gets ripped off, and there's nothing I can do about it. People are doing something about it now. Yeah. Well, to your point, there are so many other factors now beyond IP theft. And, a common problem we always heard was like the language barrier when you're working with companies overseas. Those used to be 2 of the biggest pain points. But now it's, people just can't get product into the U.S. And it was hard before with customs. Sometimes they would hold on to those shipments for a really long time for regulatory reasons or inspections or whatever, tariffs. And it's much, much worse now. So was that list, were those jobs that were coming back to the U.S. from China? And you're saying that was their 7th on the list? 7th on the list of countries that are being reshored from. Oh, being reshored from. Okay. But they think that that's maybe not accurate.
And just to probably build on that point, when you look at the number 4 exporter from China, it's SAIC Motor. They do a lot of stuff with electric vehicles, and one of the things that the Reshoring Initiative pointed to in their report was the majority of those things coming from Korea and other places in Asia dealt with electric vehicle batteries, components, other things related to those vehicles. SAIC motor in China, that's what they do.
Yeah.
So
Well, think about it. Like some of the major hubs that we see going in, the battery hubs, like what is it in Tennessee, where they're establishing these battery manufacturing plants and the entire supply chain right around them in the same area, so they don't run into these issues.
Well, supply chain visibility has always been sort of a critical issue, catch term, whatever you want to say. It's real now. It's never been more real than in the last 18 months.
A lot of it made me think of, I don't know if you guys got a chance to read the article, America is Running Out of Everything by Derek Thompson in The Atlantic.
I saw it, yeah.
And it was just, I thought that it, because you talk about manufacturers pushing the issue, where I think we're really at a point where consumers are going to start pushing the issue as well. Because, from the article, Thompson writes, the pandemic and the supply chain breakdowns are a reminder that the decline of manufacturing can be felt more broadly during a crisis when we run out of, well, damn near everything. And we're talking about like shortages of, people worry about, toilet paper and canned goods, but when we're having problems with, semiconductors, when nothing is getting made and it has a real impact on prices skyrocketing and availability, especially when there is a little bit more disposable income not being there, I think consumers are going to push the agenda a little bit more in terms of reshoring.
Well, what it's really going to come down to is, are they willing to pay more? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in some of the stories down the line in terms of worker shortages and strikes and what that's going to do to the price of things. Well, if we stop sourcing from a lot of these lower cost countries, are we willing to pay more? Are you willing to pay more, a couple $1,000s more for a new vehicle because those things were made here in the U.S.?
The other thing that I have never contemplated was how many of the containers are made in China. So we're having a shipping container shortage, and 90% of containers are made in China. Like, of all things to start making, make containers.
Well, that's where all the steel is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't think beyond how they're going to do it. Just, first of all, do it.
Just make them.
Sort it out. Yeah, just make them. All right. Anna, what did you think of that article?
I thought it was interesting. And, we saw... we're seeing evidence of this this reshoring daily, I think now. So I feel good about the fact that something is being done about it in some areas. We just ran a story this week about a rubber glove manufacturing facility that's coming to Virginia. It's going to add 2,500 jobs and make critical PPE for the medical supply chain. That's really, really important. And we saw problems with that during the pandemic. I saw yesterday a story about a solar panel manufacturing plant that's being built in the U.S. That's another, the solar supply chain has been long known for being very China intensive and some of the costs that are involved in getting those materials over here. That's a big deal. So this stuff is happening. The article was really good. The Atlantic does some great work. They've been covering a lot of these issues for a long time, and I'm glad that people are taking notice of they have some great writers on staff. But yeah, it's compelling. It's compelling and scary at the same time.
All right, let's move on to our next most popular story this week. Taiwan's Foxconn has a deal to buy Lordstown plant in Ohio. Foxconn Technology Group has reportedly reached a deal to buy an auto assembly plant in Ohio from Lordstown Motors. The move will help Foxconn in its pursuit to enter the electric vehicle market, and it could give the electric truck startup a $280 million cash infusion. Fox is paying $230 million for the plant and bought some $50 million in highly valuable Lordstown Motors stock. Lordstown Motors last month said that it might not live to see 2022. The old GM plant is located near Youngstown, Ohio, and at its peak, it employed 10,000 workers. The purchase seems odd because in March, Foxconn said it was considering making plants in its Ghost Town plant in Wisconsin or in Mexico. Anna, what did you make of this story, given that the two companies in the headline, not really known for honesty and execution?
I know. This is like a distrust-themed episode of the podcast. Yeah, you mentioned Wisconsin. So here in Wisconsin, when you mention Foxconn, you might get a pretty dark perspective on this.
Yeah, you get the cringe.
We had a pretty massive and very public Foxconn con. There were many of us in this industry who saw that coming. Foxconn has pledged some massive investments, and They plan to take billions in offsets and credits from Wisconsin. Now the project has been described as, quote, largely abandoned. And it scaled from about $10 billion initially to like $600 million now. And $600 million is no small potatoes, but it does reflect the hard truth, I would say, that Foxconn, who has also made promises in other states that it has failed to deliver on, is to be taken with a very large grain of salt. So what could happen here in Lordstown? The company's in a pretty precarious position, as David mentioned, and I worry that they've bet their future on a company that can't be trusted. I do think it's a good thing that Lordstown is unloading real estate. You've seen that with other manufacturers, especially during the pandemic. Like McLaren sold their factory during the pandemic and just basically said, like, hey, we're not in the real estate business, we're manufacturers. It freed up like a couple $100 million in cash. It's not a bad idea. I just worry that Foxconn could screw this up. and they're not afraid to go back on their word. We know that. We've seen it countless times. And let's just acknowledge that this is being characterized as a non-binding agreement to negotiate the sale. It is far from over. It's not a done deal. Anything could happen here. And if it does, like, can Lordstown even survive that hiccup? You know what I mean? Like, say it doesn't even work out. Can they get past that? I don't know. That's how bad things are, I think, for them right now.
Right. Jeff, your thoughts on whether or not they're going to start making electric cars in Lordstown?
Yeah, it's interesting. The one thing that I guess where I'd have some caveat of hope is the fact that back in May they signed a deal with Stellantis. Okay, so Foxconn does have a deal there where they're working with a major automotive company, major car maker, for more connective devices that go into the vehicle. So it's not vehicle manufacturing per se, but it is in Foxconn's wheelhouse, and there's an automotive connection there. And when you are dealing with a partner of that size, having this type of potential infrastructure that Lordstown would offer from a production perspective, there is a benefit there, and they're getting a pretty sweet deal. Let's be honest. It's a big building and a lot of potential assets for what they're paying. The other potential benefit, if there is any type of infusion in cash into Lordstown, hopefully you can keep those folks employed. I mean, there's hundreds of people employed there. That's a small, not a small, but it's a community that depends, or was very optimistic anyway, in what Lordstown Motors was going to do. So there are those positives here. And again, there is that. I could see this one working a little bit better because of that connection, because there is some not just manufacturing infrastructure, but automotive manufacturing infrastructure with this facility. If that's what Foxconn's plan is, I think they said they want to have like 10% of the EV market within the next 10 years, whether it's components or vehicles, they don't know. Which is a weird thing to say. We're going to either make the parts of the car. I don't know. Whatever works out. We'll see what happens.
Very big number, too. Like, to just be like, well, we'll figure it out.
They just want to be a part of it. Like, so
just invite us to the party. We just want to be be there. We won't say. We won't even eat
So
anything.
this is a FOMO type purchase. They're just worried about missing out. They just want to be part of it.
So in May, they signed that deal with Stellantis for a joint development to what is it? They're going to make infotainment systems, telecommunication and computer system integration, AI intelligence or AI-based applications, 5G communications, e-commerce channels, and smart cockpit integration, which all sounded like a better play to me because, you know, let Foxconn, the consumer electronics company, do the consumer electronics. Let Stellantis do the
build the cars.
Yeah, make the cars. So, and it's always seemed off to me that Foxconn wanted to get into automotive, particularly EVs. And if you remember, in February, Foxconn announced a partnership with Fisker to make, quote, the world's most emotion-stirring, eco-friendly electric vehicles. I don't know.
That's a lot of words.
Yeah, they called it, they still call it Project Pair for Personal Electric Automotive Revolution.
Ooh, that is emotion stirring.
And so the plan calls for Fisker and Foxconn to collaborate on this new vehicle. And Foxconn said that it wanted to start making more than 250,000 pairs per year, with production starting as soon as Q4 2023. And I mean, we're in Q4 2021, and we still don't have a car or a plant. So, well, actually, that's not true. They got plenty of plants. Nobody in them and no equipment.
But if you're Foxconn, you just say whatever you want. And then, like, dare people. Like, you going to believe it?
Yeah.
Or not?
Well, I mean, they've got enough money. They've got the resources that if they want to get into a market, they can buy their way in. And, I mean, right now they seem to be really good. Well, they were at least really good in Wisconsin and manipulating a lot of tax dollars to get support for what they want to do. So,
is there that much sort of like fast money in EVs right now that's why we're seeing so many startups in electric vehicles and also other companies trying to get into the market?
I mean, everyone is under the same regulatory requirement, and that timeline's getting shorter and shorter. So, yes, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it fast money, but there's a lot of money to be had.
I think there's also a lack of confidence in the major automakers in terms of really making a dent because they've had how long to do it, and they haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. GM thinks, I mean, we ran a story about GM's big goals in terms of EVs being a part of them doubling their revenues in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, they're not doing it yet. I mean, they just had their most important EV recalled.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. Ford, maybe, but they've got a limited number of EVs out as well. And then Toyota's struggled. They've never had a clear vision on their electric vehicles. So I think it's more opportunity that stems from a lack of confidence in those big guys. The little guys are going, well, if they're not going to do it, maybe we can. Foxconn's not a little guy overall. They've got tons of money to throw at something. They've got somebody who knows how to build the shell. They can put all the stuff inside.
Yeah. I really enjoy like these grandiose statements like, we're going to double revenue or sales within 2 years. And then forward-looking statement.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, you just got to come out and say it. See if they check back in 2023 or whether or not we made the car.
They're like, we can do whatever we want, and people still make agreements with us.
That's right.
So we'll just keep saying whatever we want.
What
no one has checked that we did this a bunch of times and none of it worked. Yep.
I mean, that was so far away in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was 2017. It was a long time ago.
What is that negotiation like with Lordstown and Foxconn at the table? And they're just talking to each other like, no, but really though, right? Like, and like, you stay here, I'm going to cash the check real quick.
I don't think it's worrying about cashing the check. It's more about how much is the check actually going to be.
Oh, gotcha.
They might say it's $230 and then give them a check for less.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah. All right, our third most popular story this week. Hypersonic missile passes crucial flight test. A few weeks ago, an elite team finished the first free flight test of the Hawk, or the Hypersonic Air-Breathing Weapon Concept Missile. Raytheon worked with Northrop Grumman to build the prototype for DARPA, and the test was a success. The Hawk was released from underneath the wing of an aircraft. Seconds after it deployed, the missile's solid rocket motor boosted it to supersonic speeds. The Hawk's scramjet engine ignited and accelerated the missile to hypersonic speeds above Mach 5. The successful flight is the next step toward the eventual tech transfer to the U.S. Department of Defense for the U.S. Air Force. Like we've seen with autonomous weapons, hypersonics have become the new frontier for advanced weaponry. But Anna, I think you're going to ask, is this weaponry necessary?
I think you're going to ask. I am going to ask that.
Give her a T-shirt. She just earned a T-shirt.
Yeah, somebody, I'm going to put that on right now. It's my understanding that the U.S. has several hypersonic weapons in development, and that Russia and China have also each developed a hypersonic weapon and are working on missiles as well. So it's a bit of an arms race, though some have questioned the practical applications, as you alluded to. For example, and I'd like to get everyone's take on this, but I read one take on the Union of Concerned Scientists All Things Nuclear website that said the precise capabilities that United States hopes to gain from hypersonic weapon development remains unclear. The Department of Defense has yet to articulate a clear need for these weapons or a mission that ballistic missiles, perhaps equipped with maneuverable re-entry vehicles, could not accomplish more cheaply and effectively. So, I don't know. Do you see the applications as being critical, or are we simply jockeying for position in an arms race that's nondescript at this point? And Jeff, I know with your military background, like, you often have contextual considerations that you put out that I don't think of, or David doesn't. Any thoughts on, like, what this is really for, if it's really necessary at this time?
Necessary is always tricky, right? Because there is always a race, and when you're looking at Russia and China doing stuff, right now Russia, I believe, has the fastest missile on the planet. It's like Mach 2 or 3. Okay, so when you look at Mach 5, you're looking at something that goes a mile a second, which is kind of mind-blowing. The one thing, and we were talking a little bit about this before, when you look at ground-based applications, I don't think that hypersonics right now are really within that genre of applications. But just because of the way that these things work, they seem to need the cooled air that is generated when you're moving. So if you're in a plane, you're already going pretty fast. You fire the missile, it's able to take that and basically refuel itself using that motion. So I think that's why it's important for it to be on a plane. So I think that's where we're at right now. And I think as far as the need for it, there's always going to be someone who thinks when you can strike first, that's the best. So that's really where a lot of this, in my opinion, originates. You can get it off sooner. Right now, there's really nothing out there that can detect, or I should say stop. They can detect it. They'll know it's coming. You're just moving Mach 5.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that can shoot it down reliably right now. There's been a lot of different theories even on how you would even go about trying to stop a hypersonic weapon. Because I know I think Boeing was one that they're trying to figure something with satellites around the Earth, around using space, but they think they might be too slow because it's too far to go. So when you're looking at that, one of the things so as far as coming out in terms of how applicable it is, how important it could be, yeah, if you can strike first and they can't get to you, that's a huge advantage. The other thing is I think there's going to be applications that go beyond weaponry with this type of technology that we can use to propel something. Whether there's people in there, whether it's supplies, whatever the case may be. I mean, if you're using hypersonic technology to launch supplies, I mean, think about that. You could put it on someplace in North Carolina and send it to Africa. I mean, there's a ton of different potential applications there beyond weaponry for hypersonic technology, in my opinion.
Amazon Prime hypersonic.
Forget the drones.
They're already on it. No, hypersonic drones.
It's like the equivalent of what's those things like the tubes, you'd stick the thing in at the bank.
The tube
At the bank, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make that thing hypersonic.
I mean, the prime of the future is like within the hour, no matter where you are in the world.
No matter where. The other thing I was just going to say too is I do think this could potentially stir more conversation about who responds because it's so fast. Once you do detect it, you're going to need to respond very, very quickly. Can you trust a human being to do that? Are you going to start getting into like that AI assessment of things? And then that opens a whole nother dialogue.
As long as it's AI defense, not AI retaliation.
You're still shooting something.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of to your point, Jeff, I think while I don't know how necessary these weapons are, but in the context of, you need to be the first to strike, you need to be able to strike first. I do like the idea of advancing this technology so that way it can go into something else. As I've said before on the podcast, I'm excited by hypersonic technology, and whether or not we'll see it realized in our lifetime or not is yet to be determined, but the idea of it speeding up travel, I find to be very exciting.
Yeah.
I think it could be revolutionary. I also thought that this particular contract, it was a $200 million contract that Raytheon and Northrop are working on. So hopefully, based on what they come up with, this like sort of Hawk technology, goes into something else. And it comes from a long line of technology, actually. So originally it's building off of previous scramjet projects like the X-30 National Aerospace Plane, which dates back to the 80s, which when that was canceled, that work that went into NASA's X-43 hypersonic vehicles, and then that technology was built upon for Boeing's X-51 Wave Rider for the Air Force, which started back in the 2000s, but has had test flights as recently as 2010, 2013, where it reached Mach 5 for 210 seconds. And I mean, it just made me look at this in context of, they started working on this back in the 80s, finally saw it realized in a real aerospace application in 2013, and so whatever they're doing with the Hawk program now, it might be another, 25 years before we see it actually come to fruition in any real tangible way.
Right.
But I don't know. I think that's exciting and could stand to make a big impact. But to your question as to whether or not it's necessary, I mean...
Who decides?
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, there's no reason to go.
This is how we push stuff forward.
Yeah.
If you want to get the most, I shouldn't say easiest, but the most straightforward application right now is for a missile. We take that and we go from there.
Yeah.
So I think it is, I'll say it is necessary.
Okay. Let's move on. All right, our next most popular story. Chinese automaker sells SUV under the Dodge brand. Chinese automaker GAC Group is making its first significant vehicle exports to Mexico. What is interesting is that the SUVs will carry the Dodge brand name and will be sold by Dodge parent Stellantis at its dealerships in Mexico. The Dodge Journeys were designed by GAC and built at its factory in China. GAC hopes to sell 4,000 Journeys in Mexico this year. Company officials hope to create a foundation throughout North America with an eye toward the U.S., long a target for China's auto giants. Anna, is GAC's entry to the U.S. market going to be the Dodge Journey?
I don't think so, because the Dodge Journey was discontinued in the U.S. last year because no one bought it. And if you saw a picture of it, you would. I mean, I don't know. It's like even the most recent model year was panned so hard by the critics, and they called it outdated and boring, and everyone hated it. But it was pretty much the cheapest three-row SUV that you could buy, and still it only sold 40,000 units in 2020, and that by comparison, Toyota's top-selling RAV4 sells that many in a month. So the Journey was kind of a dud on the U.S. market, and now Dodge is trying to sell it in Mexico, where the demands for U.S.-made quality and top features are not as high, and competition is not as intense. Some commenters on our website called this a bad move, and I just don't see it. Chinese companies have been building vehicles for a long time, and the idea that there will be quality issues lurking behind the Dodge brand doesn't really account for the fact that China has a sizable auto industry already. I mean, in 2019, China accounted for something like 30% of global vehicle production. They are not new at this. Yeah. Secondly, these cars are not being sold in the U.S., so if you don't want them, please certainly don't move to Mexico and buy one, okay? But they're not, I mean, I know people are like, what about the future? What's this mean for the future? But for now, it's really a nothing issue, in my opinion. I don't see the problem.
Dodge, or Jeff, is it smart for the company to essentially license the Dodge brand?
Well, it's what they do. GAC is basically, as I understand it, sort of a contract manufacturer for a lot of big automakers in China. Yeah. They make cars for Toyota, they make cars for Honda, and they sell them in China. So those are two brands that have extremely positive reputation as far as reliability goes. So I wouldn't be worried about there. It was an interesting choice as far as the vehicle to pick. Like Anna was saying, I mean, as far as mid-size SUVs go, this was it wasn't even in the top 30 for sales, which says two things. Number one, it wasn't even in the top 30, but there are more than 30 options for mid-sized SUVs right now. So that's insane. I think if you're looking at just from GAC's perspective, this is kind of like a win-win, right? They're basically taking a vehicle where there's no pressure because the sales haven't been there before. They're not asking for a ton, but it does give them a footprint, gives them a place where they can go in, build some cars, and they're close to the biggest market, consumer market, not car market maybe, in the world. So I think it's smart on their part. I don't think we have to worry about GAC being a huge player in automotive, in the U.S. automotive market right now. But down the road, who knows? If this works well and we continue to see the big vehicle makers struggle with either different types of models or with electric vehicles, and they've got a lower cost supplier like this or manufacturer, who knows?
So the new Dodge Journey is based on the Trumpchi GS5, which is a compact crossover produced by GAC, right? So the 2021 model of the Trumpchi GS4 Plus was launched earlier at the 2021 Shanghai Auto Show. What I was wondering is, are these already made and they just swapped the branding on the car?
My understanding is basically the automaker says, we want to put out this type of vehicle in China. We want to get there. And GAC is the one that's going to make it. Toyota's not going to make stuff in China. It's just not going to happen for all those reasons we just talked about before, the bad environment there. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at the vehicles that GAC puts out, if you look on their website, they look pretty similar to a lot of those Toyotas and Hondas and other similar vehicles.
So another thing, Anna, that it made me think of is we cover a lot of these lower cost cars that are never going to see the light of day in the U.S. market. And because there's always, whenever we cover it, like when we covered the Opel Roxy SUM EV, it got a lot of chatter on the site, but it's primarily going to be available in Europe. And it's still, but it's a new electric car that's going to come in under $7,000. So it's great to stimulate the conversation, but I feel like at the end of the conversation, it's always, but it's not ever going to be here.
Right, and I think that has nothing to do with country of origin. It has everything to do with the U.S. does not have a market for those tiny cars at this time. Maybe someday that changes, but not now.
The other one that I remember getting excited about, and I don't know if you guys remember it, but the Tata Nano from Tata Motors.
Yeah.
Because, again, primarily going to be sold in India, but it was a car that was $2,500. And so that got a lot of people talking, and it's just like, everyone's talking about whether or not it'll be supported in the United States, and it's like, it's never coming here, and no matter what. So, but I like that.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it at least inspires automakers in the U.S. to think that maybe it could be done a little bit differently.
Sure.
Maybe not.
I think the U.S. auto lobby would have a lot to say about a $2,500 import coming in. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Jeff, to your point as to whether or not this makes them one step closer to going to the U.S., according to CNET, GAC Motor really wants to sell cars in the U.S. But between the current political climate and consumer attitudes towards Chinese cars, it doesn't seem like a realistic possibility.
Well, then there's that whole structure that Tesla ran into, right? With dealerships and the whole sales distribution thing that's a little bit, I don't quite understand, to be real honest, but they would also have to deal with that. And man, there's going to be tons of challenges and obstacles just getting to market.
Well, exactly. And concessions that states would make for an American car maker like Tesla, they would not make.
And you would think all along the way, every time you have to, deal with one of these obstacles, that's going to increase your pricing. That's going to increase all your costs. So, I mean, right now, people don't want to pay $28,000 for a Journey. Are they going to pay $35,000? Probably not.
All right. Our most popular story on the website this week: workers at all of Kellogg's U.S. cereal plants go on strike. Kellogg's cereal plants in Omaha, Nebraska, Battle Creek, Michigan, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Memphis, Tennessee came to a halt on Tuesday when some 1,400 workers went on strike. The pandemic has made the last 18 months hard on employees, which saw many Kellogg's workers putting in 12-hour shifts and mandatory overtime to meet demand. Kellogg's says its compensation and benefits are already among the industry's best, adding that employees made an average of $120,000 last year. However, workers say it took a lot to get there, including 74 to 84-hour work weeks. Employees worked 12-hour shifts 7 days a week throughout the pandemic. When mandatory overtime was announced, workers were sometimes given just a few minutes' notice. Worker Dan Jordan, a packing machine operator who has worked at Kellogg since 2001, said, "We do make good money, but we've given up a lot." Jeff, it's not clear how much supplies of Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, or Apple Jacks will take a hit as a result of this, but sometimes I think we got to look beyond how it's going to impact us as a consumer and realize that there are some really overworked people in the industry right now, and they are tired.
Yeah, and what's interesting when you get into, there's a lot, quite honestly, to unpack in this story. I'm going to start, first of all, with one of the things that came out from Daniel Osborne. He's the president of the local union there. And I thought this was just a really interesting quote, because we're going to talk about pricing, we're going to talk about pay, but his quote was, "A lot of Americans probably don't have too much issue with Nike or Under Armour hats being made elsewhere, or even their vehicles. But when they start manufacturing our food down where they're out of the FDA control and OSHA control, I have a huge problem with that." And that was in response to some company officials saying, well, we may have to move these jobs to Mexico. That is scary when you start thinking about. I mean, we've been critical of government oversight with a lot of manufacturing, but when it comes to food safety, are you going to feel comfortable? I mean, that would make me check where something's coming from, to be very honest. So I think that was an interesting point there, and really not a very smart tactic, in my opinion, by Kellogg's to start talking about that. And the other thing is, they started talking about bringing in non-union workers. How many times in the past, I don't know how many months, we've talked about there's nobody out there taking these jobs.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to pay the folks that want them, that know how to do them, and obviously have been doing them extremely well and working very hard, how are you going to replace them?
I mean, well, and part of the issue here is that they've created like this two-tier system of workers where they have the lower skilled employees and this other class of workers, and that's part of the problem at these plants.
Yeah.
Just because they're not like I believe it's the lower tier that's unable, like they have a glass ceiling essentially as to what they can make and what benefits are available to them. So I mean, if that's already part of the problem, how are they going to bring?
Well, and that's part of the negotiation, because a lot of this, they call it the strike of 1,000 cuts type thing, because it's been all of this stuff that's been going on, and really, it's more about treatment. And, and this is not uncommon. We talked about this with Frito-Lay as well.
Yeah.
It's not all about money. It's about give us a decent working environment, respect what we want to do in terms of hours, healthcare, things of that nature. That's really at the core of this. And in this instance, as well as Frito-Lay, you're basically seeing the company reverting to sort of traditional approaches and stances when it comes to dealing with a striking union. We're in a different world now. That stuff just does not apply.
No, Anna, I think you would agree that we've talked a lot about how the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and we've talked about back as recently with the Frito-Lay thing, talking about workers becoming more emboldened, and I think this is just another example of A, that happening, and B, a workforce just reaching its tipping point.
Definitely. And I agree with a lot of what Jeff said. I mean, the company does run a risk here in saying that this won't impact operations, that they will bring in their own non-union workers. They may wish to do that and plan to do that, but the reality may be drastically different. The reference that Kellogg's makes to an average annual salary, I think we need to, talk about that a little bit. I think that was misleading. I think it was intended maybe to sow some confusion or maybe some resentment on behalf of the public, because it's such a high number. And it's not a very detailed claim, because if you look at it really, I mean, the kind of hours these workers are putting in, as you mentioned, 70-something to 80-something hour work weeks, 12-hour days, 7 days a week. So let's take that 120 and cut it in half, because these people are working two jobs, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to assess it in that way, I don't think. And, they're saying that, as you mentioned, that sometimes they're getting like a few minutes notice on overtime. Like, that is just bad management. That's not, I don't believe that that's necessary. And if you think about how the pandemic brought to light some of the challenges that working parents were already having, think about that, scrambling to make arrangements for your kids. Maybe you can't pick them up from school because you just found out you have mandatory overtime 5 minutes ago. That is not justifiable. When we know how high-tech production tracking is these days, get a freaking and on board. No wonder they're angry. I just think it also underscores what we've been learning more and more over the years, and that compensation is just a small part of the picture. And I think you mentioned that too. Workers want to be paid well, of course, but the pandemic also sort of compounded this narrative around people want work-life balance. That's really important to everyone. They want to have a job and they want to have a personal life too. That's not too much to ask. And I think that the companies that are seeing these strikes happen in their workforce that aren't typically striking, the food industry, as we've learned, is they're not known for workers striking. These workers are fed up. We need to deal with it.
Kellogg's cereal workers haven't gone on strike since 1972.
Yeah.
So, and you're right about the work-life balance. And I think part of it, I don't know if these workers were being taken advantage of or just a victim of the circumstance, because for 18 months, these were essential employees, right? These people were treated or talked about in the media, at least, as heroes. People would go the extra mile to show appreciation for these workers. They were getting paid for it, but I think that appreciation is over. And I think that burnout is so real that it is just not a sustainable model that was happening at Kellogg's. And I don't think they should be surprised. I think, talk about bad management. You can't sit there every week with mandatory overtime, 84-hour work weeks, and think, we got this sorted out.
I would manage that for 2 weeks. There's no way that I could do that for a prolonged amount of time. And you're right. For a while, they were saying we need to do this to support the country and the economy. We need to. People need these products in their homes. We got to support the grocery stores, whatever. How many times can you say that? How long can you say that before people are just all right, but something has to give here, because this is our lives. You know?
So let me ask you guys something here. So when I think of Kellogg's, the first cereal that comes to my mind is actually Raisin Bran.
Okay.
So you're in the store, you're looking at Raisin Bran. Kellogg's is going to be one of the higher priced versions of Raisin Bran. There's going to be all the generic stuff and all that. There's going to be a price discrepancy that you'll absorb because you feel it's a better quality product than some of those other ones.
2 full scoops, Jeff.
2 full scoops, absolutely.
They say it on the box.
At what point does that price discrepancy take you away from the name brand? Because in this case, when they talk about some of these, food has really tough margins.
Yeah.
Pennies on the dollar. So if they need to increase wages or anything like that, or do things that are going to cut into operating costs, hire more people, whatever the case is, that is going to result probably in an increase in price for that product. So at a consumer level, how much of that are you willing to absorb? Because not everybody's going to understand the backstory in terms of why prices went up. They're just going to know the store raised prices.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at it from Kellogg's perspective or just the consumer perspective, that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. But like in your mind, what is that? Do you have that like an amount that you're willing to still pay for the higher priced product?
No, but when it comes to cereal in particular, I am fine with the generic alternative.
Right.
And I always have been. So I've always been a cost-conscious consumer, and I'm already essentially priced out of most of Kellogg's products as a result. So for me, there's not a breaking point. How about you, Anna?
I don't know that it's clear, though, that this is the issue that would cause the price increase. We see a lot of food companies raising their prices because their cost of supply is going up, like their raw materials or, food costs are up. It's not clear that this worker situation would be the root of that. I mean, a lot of these people are just saying we don't want to work so much.
Haven't food prices already gone up substantially in the last few months?
They have, yeah.
So, and I mean, at some point, anything can cost too much. But I mean, Kellogg's has got to figure it out. Everyone's trying to figure it out right now. But we've seen, I don't think when Kellogg's comes out and says that the company's compensation and benefits are already among the industry's best, well, that might not be good enough anymore.
Well, I think that's probably dated. Okay, and again, we're in a new age here. So,
but it's like everyone, as I talk to manufacturers, and I'm hearing a lot of the same things. Like, oh, we increase wages 10%. All the things that they're doing, and they're still not getting any movement. Well, keep trying. You got to keep trying new things.
Don't stop.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, it's over. I mean, we've talked about it before too, but cereal has already taken a heck of a hit. It was down incredibly. It was down a lot until last year when schools closed, and then cereal sales went up 7%. But I mean, so far this year, they're down almost 8%. So kind of getting back to normal. I mean, not for any effort at my house because we are consuming just handfuls of.
Yeah, and the fact that this plant is running night and day, I'm surprised to hear that, I guess, because I thought that at issue here with some of these workers was that comfort food was still very much in style. Yeah. Because people aren't going to restaurants still. A lot of people are not, so everyone's still eating at home. So I think groceries are, I don't know, I thought that they were still hanging in there, but
I'm doing my best.
Yeah, even though you are satisfied with potentially 1.5 scoops of raisins, you don't even know.
David.
It doesn't even say how much is in there.
Well, I'm not the one in the house that eats it, so if they are unsatisfied with the generic alternative,
ask a 3-year-old.
Yeah, you gotta let me know. So that 2-tiered system that I had mentioned earlier, just to give a little bit more on that, it actually gives fewer benefits and less pay to newer workers, which has been a big part of the problem. And I don't think, I mean. If Kellogg's comes out and says, well, we're paying the ones that stick around more than anybody else, and it just takes a lot to get there. I don't know. I think it's just.
Well, I think that's where the union wants a little bit more just conversation. They just, I mean, like you said, it's been 72 since they've really had to do something radical in terms of getting their labor agreement worked out. So this is what they have to do to get people's attention. That's what they're going to do.
And it's really hard. We've heard it all the time. It's really hard to get manufacturers past. And not just manufacturers, a lot of companies pass the this is how we've always done it mentality. All right, let's move on to In Case You Missed It. The segment where we like to talk about stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still could make a big impact on the industry going forward. And if you guys are cool with it, I was going to go first.
Kind of says a lot about things around here, but it's fine.
Well, since no one has anything to say about it, I'll go first. Toy makers are racing to get products on shelves amid supply clogs. The Basic Fun Company did something crazy this week.
Basic Fun?
Basic Fun. Yeah. We're not even talking about
Yeah.
that. Top tier fun companies.
Not that
This is
fun. It's just
basic
like
fun.
sort of your basic
Yeah.
fun. It's okay.
Well, either
You
way.
like your job? It's pretty basic.
The Basic Fun toy company decided to ditch 1/3 of its Tonka Mighty dump trucks in China. Now, transportation costs are exploding to about 40% of the retail price. A Tonka truck cost $26. Last year, the transportation costs were only 7%. Now, this doesn't include the cost of getting the product from U.S. ports to the retailers. The Basic Fun CEO, Jay Foreman, a basic name for a basic CEO, said, "We really had no choice." Now, some companies are flying their toys because shipping costs are so high that it's about the same as for expedited flying as it is to ship it here. Now, still, toy shelves could be a little more bare and prices could be significantly higher. Even when toys get to the U.S., labor shortages are making it impossible to get them from the ports to the shelves. Now, toys that are made here are also down because of the labor shortages, not making as many toys. Now, a lot is on the line for all of this because it's a $33 billion U.S. industry, and holiday sales account for 20% of the overall industry. Now, I was just thinking, it's either a good time to give less for the holidays, or maybe have Christmas in July.
Sounds like Santa's going to be dropping off a lot of gift cards.
Yeah. You're not going to want to use them until
Yeah.
next year. Because that was another thing that was crazy about this story, was that because of the shortages, retailers are already demanding that they start shipping next year's holiday season stock starting in March and in June. Just so, and I mean, I don't know. It's I mean, I understand that when you talk about toys, a lot of people, kind of lose it. But in the long run, we're all given too much right now, anyway.
Agree. Yeah.
I was just kind of interested what you guys thought about this, because I found it interesting that a company finally just said, you know what, keep them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, do you think this is something that we're going to see more of? Where, I mean, essentially, it's just going to hang out and they're not even going to try getting it over here?
I think this is a microcosm of a lot of different industries' supply chain challenges right now. And I think we're just talking about sort of a new norm in terms of labor negotiations and the labor situation. Same thing with supply chain. There are some industries that are just going to have to not reset, but just reacclimate themselves to a new normal, because toys aren't the only industry that's having this type of problem.
Yeah.
I think it's obviously coming into focus because of the time of year and the seasonal demands, and people probably don't appreciate the number of jobs and economic activity tied to all of that holiday spending sometimes. They're thinking about, well, it's exclusive to stores, it's exclusive to delivery. No, it gets into manufacturing, it gets into a lot of other areas. So it's interesting that it's hitting now, and I think there's more depth on it within this article, which was really interesting. There's a lot of other supply chains seeing the same type of dynamic right now. Now, I don't know if they're dumping as much stuff like that, just leaving it where it is. And at some point, that's going to come back.
Yeah.
But definitely those issues in terms of getting the product to consumers' hands. Yeah.
Well, talking about the logistics industry, it was like 5 different industry groups got together and wrote a letter saying like, hey, we're all burnt out too.
Yeah.
And it was like, what, airlines, trucking, all came out and said like, we're almost done with this also. And I mean, I know that it's a lot of, they're trying to get attention, but that could make for some real hairy environment during the holidays.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. And with the truck driver shortage, like, who's going to drive those Tonka trucks?
Yeah. Need to get them there.
Well,
I was just kidding. I meant like drive them.
Oh, gotcha.
Sorry.
Gotcha.
I am sorry. I'll go now.
Anna was making a light-hearted remark. That's what threw us.
Right? Just like, all right.
Thought she was coming.
Who is she damning now? Oh, no. She's talking
making
about
a joke.
innocent children playing with trucks.
Okay.
I am not a monster.
Said the monster. And, no.
It's the first thing a monster would say.
The thing I was talking about with U.S. toy manufacturers, another thing the article mentioned is that they're still making toys, but because of the labor shortage, there's a bunch in their product lines they can't even produce because some of these toys take 6 or 7 workers to produce. They only have 2 or 3, and so you're going to see a lot more basketball nets, they said, instead of like much more complicated toys.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the basic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys saw, but Amazon actually like started their Black Friday deals early because they are trying to like urge consumers to get their orders in now because they have I think even Amazon, that's sort of saying they don't know what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah. All that just-in-time methodology is kind of being putting on hold right now.
Not working right now.
Yeah.
I've read that a lot where it's like if you want to make sure you have it for the holidays, it's middle of October. If you want to make sure you have it. And I don't know how you guys do it, but I'm a December 21, like with a full list still to go.
Well, my kids, they are working on their Christmas lists throughout the year, but there's always like an updated version that gets issued like every month. So I don't whatever they ask for now is not going to be like what they really, really want in December. That's the hard part about it with little kids, I feel like.
Well, so that was another interesting. Sorry, we can get off this topic in a second, but like,
He's not going anywhere.
What happens every year? There's like some toy that breaks out and is the Furby, the Tickle Me Elmo, the toy that nobody saw coming as the popular toy. Well, when that happens, there's not going to be any more. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a huge impact because all of a sudden kids are going to go, the Tonka Mighty Dump Truck is going to have a great ad and, no one can get a truck.
Actually, and Toys R Us is gone.
Toys R Us is gone.
This is sad.
This is why teenagers are so great at Christmas time because the 2 things they want are money and to be left alone. And I don't have to worry about going to any place for either one of those. So.
Oh my goodness, money and silence. All right, well, let's move on. Anna, what was in case you missed it this week?
I'm going to hit you guys with some more cereal talk. I hope that's okay with everyone.
Very good.
Kellogg's has partnered with Wendy's fast food restaurants to produce a breakfast cereal that was inspired by a Wendy's menu staple. And it's the Baconator. Just kidding. It's not. It is the Frosty, which is something I've never actually had. So I found it funny how much the people of the internet disagree on what a Frosty is. So I'll describe it as a malt milkshake hybrid. And my apologies if this does not jive with your interpretation. But so the cereal is called Wendy's Frosty Chocolatey Cereal, which is a terrible name.
But it's accurate. I mean,
Wendy's Frosty Chocolatey Cereal. It's too long. It's a limited edition, so I guess they were just like, just slap whatever on it. Just describe it.
Right. Go frost some Cookie Crunch and call it a Frosty cereal.
Frosty Chocolatey Cereal. So it will feature chocolate marshmallow pieces and cocoa-coated round cereal bites, which sounds all right. I think the larger story, though, is all the innovation that's been happening in the breakfast cereal market right now, which I think...
Innovation?
Well, I thought that it ended with Clark Griswold's non-nutritive cereal garnish that he invented in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. But General Mills actually launched 16 new cereal brands last winter, like because of the aforementioned like rush on home comfort food and stuff. You're right to point out that is probably going down now that kids are back in school and people are back at work. You're just not sitting in front of the TV with your Cocoa Puffs or your Wendy's Frosty Chocolatey cereal to the degree you once were.
What is the composition is going to be? Is it going to be like a puff that kind of like disintegrates in the milk or something?
Yeah, it's like a cereal bite.
Like a Count Chocula is what I'm thinking. A combination of like a chocolate puff with a marshmallow chaser.
Frosties are amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Do you dip your fries in the cereal? Is my question.
The only thing a Frosty is good for is making you go to a place that sells ice cream.
Whoa, see?
Man, what?
The Frosty is controversial.
The things that you have eaten and the things that you are so particular about kind of blows me away.
Yeah, Frosty, it was just like, it was the first time and last time I had it was just disappointment. I'm like, oh, so somebody left real ice cream out for a bit and then served it to me?
Yeah, that's so weird though, David. Like, so ice cream is fine with you, but God forbid anyone put that in a blender?
Yeah, gross.
Gross.
I don't need it. Yeah, it doesn't need to be like I need spoon or straw. I don't need something
You know
served
what?
with a spoon and a straw.
You are not allowed to complain anymore about your kids' dietary habits.
I don't know where they get it.
Because
No.
I don't know.
No, they're picky. I'm particular. No. Actually, while we're talking about crazy cereal, the cereal industry is, getting out of control. Like, and the licensing, everything is being licensed.
I
into the
know.
cereal.
It's
Like,
weird. Like everything, they have to take an existing brand. Kind of like when only Hollywood could make like remake movies for a while.
Oh yeah.
It's
yeah.
kind of like that with cereal. They're like, is there other food that we could just make into a cereal?
Yeah.
How about this? Let's use spaghetti.
Yeah.
People like that.
Well, I was going to talk about all the Little Debbie licensing and how people are actually giving their kids Cosmic Brownie cereal. But we were talking about how, because when you initially wrote about this story, I was like, please be the chili. You know?
I know.
I want
exactly.
I want a chili cereal, or like, and it made me think there hasn't been a real move on the meat cereal market.
That there is no savory cereal market yet.
Yeah,
A bacon cereal?
well, so there was a Post made a small move on savory cereal last year or 2 years ago when they did chicken and waffles, and they did like a maple bacon cereal, and I definitely tried chicken and waffles, and
That sounds terrible.
it needs some work. It needs some work. It's hard to overcome the mental aspect of ingesting a cereal shaped like a chicken drumstick. That was hard.
And then
Sounds like dog food.
you put milk on it?
I don't. Oh man, I eat cereal dry.
Who are you?
Unless I'm using it as a topping on ice cream.
Who is the monster on this panel? I ask you.
Yeah. What we've learned today is that don't question David on anything regarding cereal or toy market knowledge. I mean, he's on it.
That was another thing I wanted to like the toy, like it's opening up this really cool boutique toy industry though, where people are getting extremely customized toys, making very short runs, and that's kind of cool that it's opened up that. You know, maybe people will pay a little bit more shop local for these sort of
Glad I could provide that segue for you.
well, Jeff, speaking of your out of this world
Oh, boy.
topics, what's your final thought, or where are we at, in case you missed it this week?
David.
What did we miss, Jeff? Tell us.
Well, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but the oldest man ever to go to space is going to blast off next Tuesday, excuse me, and it's none other than Captain Kirk. William Shatner will become the oldest man to ever go to space. He's going up thanks to Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, and he's only going to be up there for it's the short ride. But first of all, I thought it was cool that it is William Shatner. First of all, I did not realize he was 90 years old.
Yeah.
And if you look at his profile on like IMDb, holy cow,
Yeah.
that guy has done everything.
Yeah.
There is no genre, no type of media he has not been a part of.
No.
So it's impressive, and he's actually, I almost expected more elaborate commentary from him, like what he expected and what it meant to him. And he's just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm gonna go to space for 10 minutes.
Is that the short run is 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of interesting just because there is more of this going on, and it's an interesting way to get some notoriety around it. I'm sure, this was also a jab at Elon Musk a little bit. We've gone the whole podcast without talking about these guys, so thought I'd bring this in just to make
Elon
sure
Musk.
we're able to talk about it.
Do they skate the same billionaire in space blowback with a Shatner going to space because he's a lovable old cultural icon? Or do we still, like, after he goes, they're just like, yeah, we got a lot more problems out there, too?
I'm pretty sure Musk is going to come back with Captain Picard and send him up, just to kind of one-up him a little bit.
Well, they did just deploy the first, Russian team to film the first movie in space, so maybe we could get, like, the Shatner Picard to redo their Uber Eats segment up there.
Sure.
Okay, sure.
I don't think that Shatner is like a lovable old man. I think
Maybe a
he
little
has,
polarizing.
yeah, a reputation for being kind of disliked in Hollywood.
Oh, all right.
So 10 minutes is probably as long as anyone wants to be stuck on a rocket.
Yeah,
with him.
would you want to be stuck in a rocket with William Shatner?
Yeah, I would just have him do spoken word poetry the entire time. Just like, we got 10 minutes, Shatner, start talking.
Just bring him something to read.
Yeah, if you have not listened to his spoken word art, if you will, it's worth a listen.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It is very good.
He's like the king of the long pause, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, he was like smoking and drinking in a dark room, and he's not reading off anything. He's just going free association. Just like, darkness, space. Darkness and space, quiet.
I'm still thinking of Jim Carrey's. Jim Carrey's impression of him was always the best.
Yeah, I don't.
As we just fall apart here.
Yeah, that's all right. Jeff, for those not watching, Jeff had a real near miss with a new expensive machine. There was some panic in his eyes. All right, well, very good. Let's move on to our final thoughts this week. Anna, what's your final thought?
So I've been talking about how much I'm enjoying fall, and I am. But we went to the apple orchard last weekend with my kids, and we're like, we are going to pick apples. And they were super excited. And then we got there, and I was like, how do we pick apples? And the lady was like, well, our apple crop was not very good this year, so we are not. It's an apple orchard. Let me say this again, that we were at an apple orchard. And she's like, our crop was not very good this year, so we are not letting people pick off the trees. But we have a lot of apples inside in the store, and you can pick them out of the bins. And my kids were like, we hate this. Like, they were so disappointed. I'm like, I'm sorry, guys. We'll try to find another orchard next weekend. This is super lame. But so we got a lot of apples. We have been eating them. They are delicious. But I really wanted to pull them off a tree.
Yeah. What's interesting, and that's always been my issue at an orchard, is that you still came away with probably more apples than you were anticipating.
We got a peck. Yep, you always got to get a peck. So, yeah.
Very good. Did they have the apple cider donuts?
Yeah, we got those. We got like $45 worth of apple items. We got cider, we got donuts, we got a peck of apples, and everyone got a little pumpkin, like the tiny pumpkin that they put in their rim and then wrote on with markers.
I got to imagine that they weren't advertising the fact that you cannot pick the apples.
They were not.
It's just like, come for apple picking out of a...
That we have already done. Yeah.
We can't afford baskets, so they're just dirty 5-gallon buckets.
I know. It's like, did I just pay to go to the grocery store? Like, I already do this.
Oh, man. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
David, I'm going to have two final thoughts. You're just going to have to be okay with that.
I am okay with it.
First one, actually, if anybody has not seen the Industrial Distribution Top 50, Big 50 list, it is great. It's a video that we do every year. Anna and Mike Hockett put it out, break it up into 3 different videos, counting on the 50 biggest distributors. I always look at it just because there's a ton of market knowledge in there, just about the industrial sector. I think you guys did a great job with it. Eric and Alex did a great job putting it together, too. So if you get a chance to go to inddist.com, check it out.
Thanks, Jeff.
Definitely worth it. It's good.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good work, guys. The other thing, which is on all of our minds right now, is playoff baseball.
The Milwaukee Brewers.
Sorry, Atlanta Braves fans, it is the Brewers in 4 for this first one. I'm calling it right now.
Man, that is an aggressive call.
Nah. Confident.
Nah.
Confident.
They can only play 5.
So you're saying... so you're saying that if we string this podcast for another hour and 36 minutes, that's okay, but we can't go an hour 37? That's when the game starts?
Sure.
That's when the game starts.
Well, I got to edit it, so let's wrap it up.
All right. Well, because we love our video producers, we're going to wrap it up this week. I don't have a final thought. I was going to piggyback off of Anna's and say how we're going possibly going to get to a pumpkin patch this weekend, but we've been like possibly doing that for the last 3 weeks. So
you could just go to the store.
I can't. I mean, but pumpkin picking has never been. We've never actually gone in a field and done that. It's just like you go to the whatever trailer you want in size.
Yep.
And that's where you go, and try not to drop it on a child.
Yeah.
That was a reality I didn't know existed. Also, you can't send them down a slide without holding them. They go pretty quick. Learned that one on an oversized slide last year. All right. So, everyone, stay safe and be good to each other. All right, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. To email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Remember, the first 20 people to reach out will get that free Today in Manufacturing podcast t-shirt. So let us know your size. Otherwise, Anna's going to get one too. Maybe. You can also make sure to subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure that you get the podcast in your inbox first. All right. For Jeff and Anna, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.